Welcome to another weekly Forex forecast, traders. As always, we will start with the DXY. So you can see we have called out these two areas of weekly demand back to back. You can go back and watch my forecast. I called out this first area of demand right here back in April, I believe it was, and this was a zone from back here. And then this zone, we've been talking about this demand zone on the weekly chart for quite a while now, the last couple weeks, saying we are expecting to see price react off of this demand zone and go to the upside. You can see on the screen right now. That is me calling out these zones ahead of time in this weekly Forex forecast, traders. So that is a good reason to smash that like button and subscribe if you are new to the channel so you don't miss any of these forecasts. So we expected dollar strength. I am actually expecting price to potentially pull up to this weekly area of supply at 103.06. And this isn't even that big of a move in the grand scheme of things. You can still be long term, like over the next year or so, bearish the dollar, meaning price could still pull up to the supply and then rally off of that weekly area of supply. So it's nice to see price react off this demand, and we are still expecting to see dollar strength. And shout out to this guy here who, apparently I should be stopped doing these videos because my analysis has been all wrong. Well, not really, as you can see, based off of these two zones. So shout out to that guy. And on the daily time frame, we just removed this daily downward trend line. So it's actually very significant. We did see this move from here to here. That was that previous weekly demand, I'm pretty sure. And we just didn't really remove a downward trend line. So now we have removed the downward trend line, and that is a bullish sign. It's not like we have a daily trend to the upside though. This would really be the ultimate signal in my opinion. But the break of this trend line definitely can indicate that we are going to be at least pulling up to the 102.36 area at that daily supply, where we can then maybe see a move to the downside. So we are definitely remaining bullish here on the US dollar. Looking over here on the 4-hour chart, you can see we clearly had a lot of manipulation. This was due to the Trump whatever. I don't really pay a lot of attention to that, guys, but this was basically manipulation, and we pretty much ignore it at this point on the chart. So we still have a fresh demand zone, in my opinion, at 98.08 that we still could see a move off of. So it's possible we see maybe Monday, Tuesday weakness in the US dollar to retrace down to this 4-hour demand and then rally up. So it's definitely an area of demand that you want to have in your charts as a potential area of interest on the DXY. On the 1-hour time frame, you can see we had a nice 1-hour trend to the upside. That trend was removed by this area of supply. Not my favorite supply zone, not the best move away. It is a gap zone. So it's actually a decent zone as far as that. It's just the gap is not that large. As far as moves away, we're looking for massive moves away like that. But this isn't terrible. It's just not amazing. So it is possible we retrace up to this 1-hour supply and then react off that supply to the downside at 98.61. But since we are bullish on the DXY, since weekly demand is in control on the DXY, and we are expecting the bulls to continue here, we are expecting maybe only a small move off the supply and then to break it, and preferably to break the highs as well. That's going to really signal strength. But I am saying once we hit this 1-hour supply, it could be like a day of hesitation or even some weakness in the DXY. So a couple zones for us to watch here on the DXY as far as the 4-hour and the 1-hour chart goes, and as far as a higher time frame goes. Look, we have a weekly demand in control, clear profit margin to opposing supply above, and the downward trend line has been broken on the daily chart. In my opinion, all signs are showing more upside potential here on the US dollar. All right, onto the forecast for the Euro US dollar. So I don't quite have an opposing weekly supply zone here. Obviously, the Euro is the opposite of the dollar, so we could expect to see a weekly supply zone here because the weekly demand is in control on the dollar. I don't have that, although I do have the the demand down below in the weekly chart. So we could see that move down to that weekly demand kind of long term, maybe in this next year here. On the daily chart, however, it's actually different than the DXY. We still have this daily trend being respected. So it's actually quite interesting. I don't really know what to say about that. It's definitely contradicting in my opinion. So if we do pull back, we have a demand zone here. We could see maybe a rally off of, and maybe the euro gets so strong down here or whatever that maybe that it changes the dollar trend. It's possible. I'm not saying that the dollar is going to go up 100%. All I like to point out is the zones, and this is a semi-decent zone. It's really not amazing. Nothing I would really trade as if this was an entry time frame for me, but it's not bad. I think we could at least hesitate around that zone, especially since we will have some trend line liquidity here as well. So it's definitely something to monitor on that chart. As far as the 4-hour chart goes, I mean, all signs are still pointing to the downside here. Depending on how you drew this supply, some people probably want to draw it like this, which is even tighter. I kind of drew it like this. It's really tricky because like I said, we had so much manipulation here, which we're basically ignoring that. And I was telling the members, this is still a good supply zone for potential shorts. And we almost hit it again at 116. So it's still fresh in my opinion. I still think if we pull up, at least if we break above this high and push in the supply, I still think we could see a move off of it. So it's still a decent zone to look for potential shorts off of. And even this one up here, this was actually a trade we took, and it didn't even actually hit the zone, but that's why you always like to enter a little bit before the zone and have your stop loss a little bit after the zone. So if you don't feel comfortable with just taking this zone, like with the stop loss below, like I'm saying, you could just look for confirmation on a 15-minute chart if you're a day trader when the zone is hit again, based off of this weird price action we are seeing. But at the end of the day, it's still a decent zone. The move away is really good. It removed a trend line and an opposing demand zone. And not only that, we have clear profit margin all the way down to this 4-hour demand zone from back here. So I think it's good for potential shorts to trade all the way down to 114. This is kind of our profit margin in my opinion. And then once this demand zone's hit, I think we could even see a small move off of here, maybe catch a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 trade before price ends up breaking that zone. So that is what I'm going to be watching over here on the 4-hour chart on the euro. As far as the 1-hour chart goes here, we didn't have a whole lot going on as far as this 1-hour chart goes. I guess in theory there is a little demand zone here that removed that downward trend line. Let me just see. So it's not bad, but it's kind of a reaction off of this previous demand zone back here. It's just really a weird situation. I'm just going to tighten that up to separate the two here. So if you are bullish, again, this is not my favorite zone ever, but it's not bad. We could maybe see a small move off this 1-hour demand zone to the upside, potentially at 1.16. And then if you want to continue trade shorts on this 1-hour chart, what you could be doing is basically waiting for both of these demand zones to be removed. And both of them don't have to be removed. Let's just say, for example, this one gets removed here, this one gets respected, but maybe this demand gets respected to push back up to the supply that removed that demand zone, where then we can get a short trade to potentially ride the trend down again. So that is what you'll be waiting for as far as shorts go here on the 1-hour chart on the euro US dollar. All right, on to the forecast for gold on the weekly time frame. What this is showing us here is we should be favoring longs in the long term. It doesn't mean that there's no money to be made on moves to the downside, but what that does mean is that if you are going to be trading counter trend to this weekly chart, counter trend is short, guys. So remember that counter trend is short. You want to be aggressive with your profit taking, in my opinion. So all signs are really pointing to the upside here as far as the weekly chart goes. However, on the daily chart, we have a little bit of a dilemma going on. And we're not really hesitating, but I just mean we're kind of flagging out here. It is some sort of hesitation, but the hesitation is, from a long time. This is going back to the start of April. We started to kind of hesitate here. So it's not really looking super clear. However, what I'm seeing is this trend line from back here on the daily chart. This trend line is clearly being respected, right? It almost hit it here. Then we actually hit it here 3 times now, and it's being respected. So what that tells me is the bulls are in control, and we could definitely continue to push up towards these highs again as far as that daily chart goes. Not only that, on a 4-hour chart, a lot of weird price action, right? If you really look at this, to me, this kind of looks like an entire range, and to you, it might look like one big kind of range, and you'd be kind of right. However, when you really look at things the way we look at things here on my channel and in my group, you can see we have some higher highs here and a very clear trend line. The trend line is actually from here to here. This touch here, even though we peak below it, that's actually just a reaction off of our properly drawn trend line, guys. I don't want to sound pretentious like that, but I mean, it's properly drawn in my opinion. We moved to a higher high. There's a higher high here. So it's a proper trend line in my opinion as far as logic goes. So that's the move off the trend line. It is super bullish. And as long as this trend line is being respected, let me just extend it. Make sure you draw this trend line exactly how I draw it. You can see as long as this trend line is being respected, 15-minute time frame longs are going to be completely fine. Even if you push down to the trend line and react, that's actually great. But as soon as we break this trend line, we basically have to hold off on potential longs, in my opinion, unless we pull back into a couple of these zones here on the 1 hour chart. So you can see on this 1 hour time frame, we had a pretty nice 1 hour downward trend line here, and the downward trend line was removed. The downward trend line was removed by this zone here, but this zone down here is a little bit better. So this is a great little lesson on what zone is better. Both of these zones are pretty good in my opinion. The basing I prefer on this one, but the move away I prefer on this one. And this is something we discuss in the supply and demand PDF, which comes in the Diamond membership. You can see on the screen, we have the 4 types of moves away that are, we talk about the poor move away, which isn't even a zone, the like the decent move away in figure 2, and then the A+ move away, which is the most common one and what we always look for, and then the gap zone as well, which is very strong. And in my opinion, guys, these are both A+ moves away, but this one down here, this move away is A++ in my opinion. It's just a little bit better. But at the end of the day, we have 2 zones here. And I get a lot of questions. Kevin, how do I trade this when there's 2 zones? Look, you have many options. You could simply put an entry and a stop loss below both of these zones, target a 3-to-1, whatever you want to look for, and then maybe price comes here, 2-to-1, maybe you move your stop loss or break even, you take this trade, that's a winner. You could literally take both of these trades, and then now you're down minus 2% because they both lose, and then maybe you take a trade down here, up, now you're up 1% after a 3-to-1 risk reward. You could simply just take this one. You could simply just take the one at the extreme. It's really all up to you, and it's something that you're going to have to back test. One thing I also noticed is we have another 1 hour zone all the way down here at 3,300. So we have a lot of decent zones here in gold we could see moves off of. And if you don't feel comfortable, again, just with the entry and stop loss, if you are a day trader, you're in luck because these can be viewed as your higher time frame demand zones. As a swing trader, for me, my higher time frame is my daily chart and my weekly time frame. For you, this is a 1 hour chart. You could be on a 5-minute time frame looking for confirmation trades in these zones. And we talk about confirmation a lot on my channel. So make sure you watch my other videos on confirmation to know what you should be doing when price hits these high quality demand zones on gold. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the USDJPY on the weekly time frame here. Nice move off of the support level here. I don't trade support. I will look at support areas like this to look to target that liquidity underneath the support and resistance areas. It's a big part of my trading strategy at this point. Speaking of that, on the daily chart, we have another prime example. We had a clear resistance area, 2 reactions off this area. Or sorry, it was created and then we got 1 reaction. Now we are clearly targeting that liquidity. So in my opinion, it has been targeted. We have a decent daily supply over here. I love the move away. I like the basing at 149.29. If it wasn't for the fact that now we have a daily upward trend on this daily chart and the fact that the weekly demand is in control on the US dollar, I would say this is a great daily supply zone to see a nice big move off of. The issue, again, is the weekly demand's in control on the US dollar, on the DXY, so weekly demand is much stronger than daily supply. I am actually still expecting to see a move off this daily supply, so I actually think it's possible the next week or so we could see US dollar weakness, especially since we are contacting some supply zones on some of the pairs. So on 149.29, that's our daily supply. We actually could be looking for counter trend short trades, and it's fine, right? It's going against our higher time frames, but we just need to make sure we manage risk appropriately. So you can still risk the same, but it's better to be aggressive with your stops. So this zone really hasn't been hit yet. I would wait for that zone to be hit, then I would feel more comfortable looking for shorts, in my opinion. And as far as the lower time frames go, there's really not a lot going on this chart, if I'm being honest with you, on the USDJPY, guys. Supply zone here, it was decent, but then the manipulation started to take place with all that Trump stuff going on here, and it's unfortunate. So I really don't know what to be doing on this chart right now. If we remove this supply, if there's a demand zone here, yeah, maybe you could take a trade off that. But at this point, the daily supply will be in control. So it's definitely a very tricky chart to be trading at this point. And even the 4-hour trend, we had a trend to the upside. That trend was removed. And now I just don't know what to do. There is a 4-hour supply zone. Let me just see really quick. Yeah, this 4-hour supply zone, it's a set and forget. It was created back in April, but what's powerful about this supply zone is it's inside of that daily supply zone. So it could actually be the zone we see a move off of, and it's a clear area of liquidity here, but I don't really count that. It's been so long. So yeah, honestly, it's not the best pair to be trading right now until we can hit that daily supply. And then on the 1 hour chart, hopefully we get some potential zones to be removed for confirmation. So as far as the USDJPY goes this week, guys, I would be holding off and waiting for maybe that daily supply to be formed, or waiting for some new supply and demand zones to be formed on the 1 hour and the 4 hour time frame. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the GBPUSD on the weekly chart. Really looking strong to the upside, but however, remember, we are expecting dollar strength here. However, we are about to pull back into this weekly demand. It's possible we do see a potential move to the upside. It really all depends on what takes place with the DXY and Trump and all that good stuff. It's a little bit of a stressful time, but it is what it is. We got to just look at the charts. So the big question now is, will that weekly demand hold? And the other question I'm asking myself is, will price push up to this daily supply and then pull down to that weekly demand first? Or are we just going to pull back down to that weekly demand and skip this entire move to the upside? That's kind of the question. This is a daily supply we definitely could see a move off of. Daily supply zone's pretty large, so this is an area where you want to be looking for confirmation in, like on an H1 chart or even a day trading time frames, like a 15-minute time frame as well. On the 4 hour time frame, over here, we have a old demand zone, and the demand zone's pretty good. I like that it's an original zone, base rally, nice move away, removed an opposing trend line, and not only that, we did create some sort of liquidity here, and we're clearly reacting off of that there. So I think this zone could be good for maybe a small move. It's old. I like the liquidity here. That's the only reason I like to trade old zones usually, is when we have a liquidity. And it's really not super duper old. Like, it's not like we were scrolling back all the way over here, right? It's not super old. It's just not my favorite situation. So it might only be good for a small move. However, let's say price was back here. If we got the pullback immediately, it could have been a better trade. We actually could have been looking for a bigger move. However, when price pushes up this far, the DXY was also pushing down, and weekly demand is in control now. So that's why the whole market structure has changed up here. That's why this trade now, since it's a little bit older, is only good for a small risk to reward, guys. Remember, it's very, very important when you got to know these things when knowing how much to look for in a potential trading setup. On the 1 hour chart, there's really not a whole lot going on here. We had a 1 hour zone and we got a beautiful move off of it, kind of a large zone. So what do you do in these large zones? You could look for trades on a 5-minute time frame, and that's exactly what one of the members, D, looked for. He got a 5-minute confirmation trade inside of this 1 hour area of demand. Picture perfect zone, as you can see on his chart. So congratulations to him on an amazing trade. If you want to trade alongside myself and the community, join the Diamond membership for exclusive access to our daily market breakdown videos and catch trades like these. Plus, dive deep with our full-length forecast covering 26 plus markets, our interactive Sunday Zoom sessions, and personal homework to sharpen your strategy. And you'll also join our private Discord group for direct access to me and unlock a complete library of A to Z video lessons to master supply and demand trading. Don't miss out. Let's level up your trading. Links are in the description down below. All right, on to the forecast for the USDCAD on the weekly chart here. We've been talking about this weekly demand. It is clearly in control. What I like about it is it correlates with the DXY as well, right? So we are expecting dollar strength. The USDCAD is into weekly demand. We are expecting price to rally here, guys. And just another shout out to one of the members, Dukes, on a great trade on USDCAD, 6.6 RR, crazy trade. So absolutely love those large risk reward trades, and very happy for a lot of the members who have been absolutely killing it lately. As far as the 1 hour time frame goes, something very unfortunate took place here. We had a great supply zone. Again, it was an old zone, but we had a liquidity search right before it, which made it valid in my opinion. But it was kind of old. It sketched me out, and I pulled my order. And if you look, that trade worked out beautifully. It is what it is, and I'm moving on, and I'm not letting it bother me, right? So just letting you guys know, I've been doing this for 6 years, and I still make, I don't want to call it a mistake, but I still hesitate, right? I'm not perfect, so don't expect to ever get past and be a absolutely perfect trader. So look at all the money I missed out on, and that's fine. There's always next week and tomorrow. As far as the USDCAD goes, what I'm waiting for now simply is a pullback down to this 4 hour demand zone. I'm not sure if we're going to get that. I mean, we have clear momentum to the upside. If we break this momentum, I think that's where we are headed. It's a decent rally-based rally. I like the zone. It removed not only a supply zone, but a downward trend line as well. I like the zone. I think it's great. The question is, are we going to get a pullback? I personally have the patience to wait for a demand zone like this. I've been getting a lot of new people to my channel, so some of you might not remember or weren't even watching, but we had a demand zone back here when we initially contacted the weekly demand, and we waited patiently for this demand zone to be hit, and we got some trades off of this zone. The zone ended up failing, but there's much money to be made on the lower time frames off of that zone. And now we are simply doing the same thing, waiting for the pullback. It's possible we don't get the pullback, but that's what I am waiting for. I am waiting patiently. Remember, guys, if you can take one thing from this video, remember, not being in a trade is also a trade. So for me, I'll be waiting for this 4-hour demand zone. And if you're a day trader, I basically would be waiting for a new high on the 1-hour chart to continue to look for longs, or wait for the 4-hour demand zone to be hit and look for day trades in there as well. Alrighty, on to the forecast for the AUDUSD on the weekly chart. One of the worst weekly time frames or any charts I've seen in a while. Just absolutely nothing to go off of. However, momentum is to the upside, so we have that. But the DXY is definitely contradicting that. And for now, it looks like we are potentially breaking this upper trend line. So we got to stay tuned and monitor this trend line to see if we can close below it. On the 1-hour chart, we had a 1-hour downward trend. This 1-hour downward trend line was recently removed the other day, and it looks like we are pushing up. Now, where are we pushing up into? There is some 1-hour supply zones above. However, I'm going to be more focused on the 4-hour chart. I'll show you guys here in a second. These 1-hour supply zones are basically just inside of this overall 4-hour supply zone that is above. So I think it's a good zone. I mean, the zone was responsible for removing a trend line that we actually proved it was a trend line right there by reacting off of it. So not only that, it's kind of a liquidity trap here. Not my favorite liquidity trap, but it kind of is at 0.655. So it's a decent supply zone here. If you are bullish on the dollar, you might want to get in short there. I think it's a decent zone for a potential short trade with clear profit margin down to this 4-hour demand zone, in my opinion. So it's definitely possible we see that move from supply down to demand. And as traders, we're always looking for good risk reward opportunities. And since the dollar is coming into demand, we could see price really start to explode. And that's an over 6-to-1, 7-to-1 trade right there. I'm not saying you're going to be able to hold that, but once price goes to here, maybe it's best to take 80% off and let the 25% run to a posing demand. And then even if price does pull back to this demand zone, I think it's a great opportunity to potentially get a long trade. Again, we're gonna have to monitor the trends on the higher time frames. Maybe this long trade, maybe we got to be more aggressive with that because it might be counter trend or counter narrative to the DXY. So a couple good 4-hour zones here on the Aussie US dollar that I'd be having on my charts and trading accordingly from. And as always, guys, look for confirmation in there on day trading time frame if you're a day trader. If you don't want to take the entire 4-hour zone, that's completely fine. All right, on to the forecast for the USD Swiss. Very, very correlated to the DXY. We have weekly demand and control from back here. We are seeing a nice move off of it. Similar supplies and above. So really, I think we should be looking for longs in this pair, in my opinion. On the daily chart, not a lot of momentum loss. Really no trend line here, though. It's kind of an awkward situation as we push lower. But since the demand's in control, we want to be favoring longs. And what's funny is with that Trump spike, it was crazy. I had a loss on the euro, that 4-hour supply zone we talked about earlier, immediately. And then I had a win immediately on this USD Swiss. So yeah, I caught the dip on this entry, even though, look, guys, it was so lucky. This was absolutely insane. I love this setup. I mean, great demand zone, great support area here for a potential trap. And this, in my opinion, was just luck. So I'm not acting like this was, I still think it's a great trade for potential long opportunity, just so we know. But we kind of need that pullback soon at this point. I'm just saying this is a great trade, but this was lucky. It's kind of a really, really awkward, weird situation. So kind of funny. It was 1 win, 1 loss immediately, and just sharing you guys some, my life and my trading after 6 years. Stuff like this still takes place, and it's crazy. So with the weekly demand and control and the dollar weekly demand and control, we definitely want to be favoring longs, and we're in luck. We have a great 4-hour trend to the upside, so you want to make sure you draw this trend line with the 2 touch points there, and we have this demand zone that removed supply zone above. You can see we pierced below it, but we are basically ignoring this because it was just an emotionally driven thing when Trump said something about Powell. I don't even know. I don't care. All I know is we have a weekly demand and control. We have a 4-hour demand zone here. Just like we got a trade off of this 4-hour demand zone, we want to do the same thing here, potentially look for longs off of that demand at 0.797. since this trend line's here as well, as long as this trend line's holding, 15-minute time frame longs are good as well. Last but not least, we are on to crude oil. We have a weekly demand zone in control. A lot of people might be asking, why don't we pull back down to this weekly demand? Because we had a daily demand sitting right here. It is still possible we do retrace down to this weekly demand because it's better than the daily demand that we are in. So we could expect oil weakness to retrace down to that weekly demand, but right now on the daily chart, you can see we have a daily demand that's being respected. On the 4-hour chart here, we have a 4-hour supply zone above. It's decent. It was maybe created, I think, during all that Trump tariff stuff or whatever. So take that with a grain of salt. Kind of a liquidity trap here as well. I would prefer, if I just draw this out here, I would prefer to see another move off this area, something like this. Then that makes that a higher odds situation at 69.37 at that 4-hour supply zone. Even if we break it, what I think we could see, well, first of all, if we break it, that will mean we have a new 4-hour trend to the upside, which means we could be looking for day trading longs on a 15-minute chart all the way up to this supply zone up here at 75.72. We could actually almost tighten it up. It's a little bit of a weird situation, but we could, if this zone fails and we push up, that would be our indication to go long on the day trading time frames to retrace up to this 4-hour supply where we can then try another short trade on crude oil. On the 1-hour chart, something unfortunate here happened again. We actually had a good little hidden drop-based drop supply zone. I love these zones here. Somehow I don't know. I mean, my life has been so busy with the kid and everything that I just didn't place an order here. And honestly, I would have taken a loss on this trade, if I'm being honest with you guys, and that would have sucked. This was a clear stop hunt here with news or whatever took place. I'm not really sure. And that's just the reality of trading. This is anybody who's gonna comment, say, "Oh, you're an idiot, you should have pulled it." No, this is a reality of trading. Sometimes you will get stopped out like that, and then price will go in your direction, and that's all part of trading. And that's the psychology aspect of trading, which I talk about in my Stoic Trading Psychology podcast, available anywhere you get your podcast. I've received a lot of good feedback on this podcast, and people keep telling me, keep doing them. They don't have a ton of views, but if I keep getting positive feedback, I will continue to do those podcasts if it's helping your guys' psychology out. Because look, you could find zones like this all day, and they might work in the long run. But if you lose your mind when you get stopped out like this and see price go in your direction, and then you revenge trade, you're going to blow up your account. That's why we need to learn how to deal with unfortunate situations like that. And at this point, look, all you got to do now, if that happened to you, you took a loss on that supply zone, that's fine. Identify this supply zone, try that one out. And then, like I said, if we remove that, that's fine. We'll have a trend on the upside. Then we can start to day trade long. There's always going to be more opportunities. And every time things like that happen, a big stop out like that, and it sucks, it's all a big test. And it is basically testing you to see, can you handle it? Can you continue to move on? If you want to watch the full-length forecast and get my daily chart analysis and daily market breakdown videos, join the Diamond membership. Links are in the description down below.